In a grand mansion, the aroma of a freshly prepared soup filled the air as Maria, a humble domestic worker, poured her heart into her duties, only to be met with harsh insults from her employers for a simple mistake. Her spirit, already bruised by years of servitude, sparked with a newfound resolve. The next day, as Maria cleaned the mansion, fate placed a winning lottery ticket in her hands, a ticket that would ignite a storm of accusations, secrets, and betrayals. With each passing moment, Maria's life intertwined with the Rosales family's dark truths, leading her down a path of moral dilemmas and fierce determination. The story unfolds with unexpected allies, desperate confrontations, and the question of whether Maria will seize her chance for freedom or be crushed by the weight of her conscience. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. In the heart of the opulent Rosales mansion, a storm was brewing in the kitchen, masked by the tantalizing scent of freshly cooked soup. Maria, a 25-year-old woman with aspirations that far surpassed her humble position, poured her soul into each meal she prepared. The years of relentless labor had hardened her hands, but they still shook slightly as she ladled the soup into the delicate porcelain bowls. Her every move was a testament to the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of enduring servitude. Mrs. Rosales, a woman whose beauty was only skin deep, dipped her spoon into the soup with an air of indifference. The moment the salt-laden broth touched her tongue, her face contorted with disgust. "This is atrocious," she shrieked, her voice laced with venom as she flung the spoon back into the bowl. "Are you trying to poison us with all this salt?" The words hit Maria like a physical blow, her spirit recoiling as if struck by an unseen force. All the silent humiliation she had endured over the years converged in that instant, fueling a simmering defiance in her heart. Mr. Rosales, a man whose life revolved around his business dealings rather than his family, attempted to defuse the situation with a half-hearted, "It's not that bad, dear." But the damage was already done. Mrs. Dury, dead. Rosales, relentless in her tirade, hurled accusations at Maria with each passing second, her words slicing through the young maid's already battered soul. Each insult was a lash, leaving deep, invisible wounds that would take years to heal. As Maria cleared the tabler, her hands trembling with a mix of fury and helplessness, she overheard a hushed conversation between the Rosales couple. Their words, heavy with anxiety, revealed a crumbling facade family on the brink of financial ruin. Debts, gambling losses, and failing investments were threatening to tear apart their perfect life. The revelation was a bitter balm to Maria's wounds, exposing the fragility of those who had lorded over her for so long. That night, alone in her small, dimly lit room, Maria wept not just for the cruelty she had endured, but for the realization that her tormentors were as vulnerable as she was. The thought of revenge, once foreign to her kind nature, began to take root in her mind. She went to bed with a newfound determination. She would no longer be the helpless victim in this twisted narrative. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the mansion's grand windows, Maria moved through the house with a sense of purpose, her thoughts consumed by the events of the previous day. While dusting Mr. Ian Rosales' study, something caught her eye, a small glimmer amidst the chaos of papers. She reached down and picked up what turned out to be a lottery ticket. Her heart pounded in her chest as she examined it, realizing that it was a ticket worth millions. For a brief moment, she imagined a fortune. Without hesitation, she slipped the ticket into the pocket of her apron. Later that day, the mansion erupted in chaos as Mrs. Rosales' frantic voice echoed through the halls. "My ticket! Where is my ticket?" she screamed, her hysteria spreading like wildfire. The entire household was thrown into disarray, with every servant subjected to intense scrutiny. Maria's heart raced as she felt the crumpled ticket pressing against her thigh like a brand. When it was her turn to be searched, time seemed to slow down. Mrs. Rosales' hands, cold and merciless, roved over her body, but the ticket remained concealed. Maria's silent prayers were answered, but her relief was tempered by a rising tide of fear. That night, Maria sat alone in her room, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. She turned on her small, flickering television just in time to see the lottery numbers being announced. Her breath caught in her throat as the numbers on the screen matched those on the ticket she had hidden. A fortune large enough to change the course of her life was now in her possession. But with the money came a torrent of emotions. Guilt gnawed at her conscience core, while fear of being discovered paralyzed her. Yet, amid the turmoil, a glimmer of hope began to shine through the darkness. This was her chance to break free, to rewrite her destiny. As she lay in bed that night, the ticket tucked safely under her pillow, Maria's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities and dangers. Sleep eluded her as she weighed the moral cost of her actions against the tantalizing, promising promise of a new life. By morning, her decision was no clearer, but her resolve had only strengthened. On her day off, Maria visited her brother in their modest, shared apartment. The sight of him, frail and prematurely aged at just 18, steeled her resolve. "But it's incredibly expensive, Maria. We could never afford it." His words echoed in Maria's mind as she clutched the ticket in her pocket. The weight of her decision bore down on her. But at that moment, she knew she could no longer remain a prisoner to her past. The ticket was her key to freedom, and she would use it to carve out a new future, no matter the cost. Every word that lashed out from Mrs. Rosales's mouth was like a dagger plunging deep into Maria's soul, each insult twisting the blade of indignity she had been forced to endure for so long. The lottery ticket in her pocket felt as if it weighed 1,000 tons, its significance pressing down on her conscience. This small piece of paper held the power to transform her brother's life, to offer him the chance he desperately needed to escape his fragile existence. But was it worth the cost of her integrity, the sacrifice of her moral compass? Back in the Rosales mansion, the air was thick with tension, almost choking in its toxicity. Mrs. Rosales, now a woman consumed by her fury and despair over the missing ticket, had become even more venomous. Her shrill screams reverberated through the opulent halls, a constant reminder of the fear that had gripped the household. She hurled accusations at anyone within earshot, her rage knowing no bounds. Maria moved quietly through the mansion, cleaning in silence, each cutting remark fueling the fire of her determination to break free. She watched Mr. Rosales, a man who once seemed so powerful and authoritative, now shrinking beneath the weight of his crushing debts and his wife's unrelenting anger. His shoulders slumped under the burden of impending financial ruin, and his voice, once firm, had softened to a barely audible murmur about bankruptcy and failure. In a moment of vulnerability, Maria almost allowed herself to confess. The words danced on the edge of her lips, but before she could speak, Mrs. Rosales struck her with a sharp slap, accusing her once more of theft. "You are nothing but a thief, an ungrateful wretch. You should be thankful we even gave you a job." In that instant, something irrevocably snapped inside Maria. The last remnants of her compassion crumbled, giving way to an ironclad resolve. This was no longer just about her brother's life or her own. It was about reclaiming her dignity from the ashes of every humiliation, every injustice she had endured. That night, as she stood bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, Maria stared at the lottery ticket, feeling its promise of freedom and a better life. Her decision was made. She would no longer be the passive victim in this story. The money would be hers, and with it she would seize the freedom she had always yearned for. No matter what consequences lay ahead, she would confront them with her head held high. Fate had finally dealt her a winning hand, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. For the first time in years, Maria allowed herself to smile, dreaming of a future where she and her brother would be free from the shackles of poverty and oppression. The following day, the fragile calm of the mansion was shattered by the unexpected arrival of Lucia, the Rosales' daughter. Freshly graduated from a prestigious university abroad, Lucia brought with her a breath of fresh air and an astute awareness that quickly detected the cracks in her family's carefully maintained facade. Maria watched her with cautious curiosity as Lucia moved through the house, her eyes sharp and observant, picking up on details that others had long ignored. Unlike her parents, Lucia exuded a warmth and kindness that Maria was unaccustomed to receiving from the Rosales family. "Is everything all right, Maria?" Lucia asked one day, her voice filled with genuine concern that took Maria by surprise. "You seem worried. Is something wrong?" Maria's heart tightened in her chest, the words she longed to speak choking her. For a fleeting moment, she considered pouring out the truth, seeking solace in Lucia's unexpected compassion. But the bitter memories of past humiliations rose to the surface, sealing her lips in silence. Meanwhile, Mrs. Rosales, driven to the edge by the loss of the ticket, made a drastic and ominous decision. Maria overheard her coldly speaking into the phone, hiring a private investigator to uncover the whereabouts of the missing ticket. Panic surged through Maria like a tidal wave. Her hands trembled as she scrambled to hide the ticket in what she hoped was a safe place, her mind racing with dread. Every creak of the floorboards and every sudden movement became a source of a terror. At night, when the mansion was cloaked in silence, Maria would sleep out of her room, plotting her escape, researching how to claim the prize without drawing suspicion. She imagined a life far away from the Rosales' cruelty, a life of freedom. But even as she planned, guilt and fear gnawed at her relentlessly. She saw the worry etched in Lucia's, the growing desperation on Mr. Rosales' face and felt the crushing weight of the secret she bore. The atmosphere in the Rosales mansion continued to deteriorate, turning it into an emotional war zone. Lucia, torn between her concern for Maria and her growing suspicion about her parents' behavior, decided to confront them directly. "What did you do to Maria?" she demanded, her voice trembling with righteous anger. "She's not a thief. Something else is happening here, and I have the right to know the truth." A deafening silence followed her words. Mrs. Rosales, usually so composed and merciless, collapsed into a chair, her sobs echoing in the quiet room. Mr. Rosales, with a heavy sigh of defeat, began to unravel the truth. He spoke of the crushing gambling debts, the disastrous investments, and the hopelessness that had driven them to pin their last hope on a lottery ticket. As Lucia listened, her world shattered. The image of her family, built on years of lies and deceit, crumbled before her eyes. Meanwhile, Maria and the private investigator had arrived at the lottery office. Her heart pounded in her chest as they stepped inside, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. The investigator's contact, a jittery man with a nervous demeanor, greeted them with a nerp. "We need to act quickly," he whispered urgently. "Questions are already being asked about this ticket." But as Maria handed over the ticket, a cold dread washed over her. The man's shifty eyes avoided her gaze, and his hands shook as he handled the ticket. A chilling realization struck her: she was on the brink of betrayal yet again. Her heart raced as she looked into the eyes of the investigator's friend, a man who held her future in his trembling hands. The world seemed to close in around her as she stood at the precipice of freedom, yet so close to losing everything. The decision she had made, once so clear, now seemed fraught with danger. As she braced herself for what was to come, Maria knew that no matter what happened next, she would never allow herself to be a victim again. In that split second, Maria's world seemed to come to a standstill. The gravity of the situation hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless and overwhelmed. The air in the room grew heavy with tension as Mr. Rosales stood frozen, his face ashen with fear and regret. It was as if the very fabric of their lives was unraveling before their eyes, revealing the raw and painful truths hidden beneath the surface. As the weight of the decision pressed down on her, Maria felt a torrent of emotions swirling within her: anger, despair, compassion, and an unyielding resolve. The lines between right and wrong, between justice and mercy, blurred in the face of the human suffering that now united her fate with that of the Rosales family. For a brief moment, the past seemed irrelevant, and all that mattered was the present, this critical juncture where lives hung in the balance. Maria's thoughts raced, and she could almost hear the ticking of an invisible clock, counting down the seconds she had to make her choice. She thought of her brother, lying helpless in the hospital bed, and the sacrifices she had made to protect him. She thought of Mrs. Rosales, once her bitter enemy, now clinging to life in the same hospital, a stark reminder of how quickly fortune could change. And then there was Mr. Rosales offering her a way out, an escape from the war that had consumed her. But at what cost? Could she, in good conscience, turn her back on justice and the truth, knowing that the Rosales family had built their fortune on the suffering of others? But could she also ignore the very real, very human suffering that now connected them all in this tragic twist of fate? Maria's heart ached with the weight of the decision before her, a decision that would define her not just in the eyes of others, but in her soul. With a deep breath, Maria met Mr. Rosales' gaze. His eyes, once so cold and calculating, now held a flicker of vulnerability, a silent plea for mercy. But Maria knew that mercy, like stasis, was not a simple thing. It required strength, not just to forgive, but to stand firm in the face of adversity. "Mr. Rosales," Maria began. Her voice is steady but laced with emotion. "This isn't just about money or silence. It's about doing what's right, for my brother, for your famille, and for everyone who has been hurt by what has happened." She paused, the enormity of her words hanging in the air. "I won't drop the charges, but I will help you. We can find a way to make this right, to save both our families from more pain." Mr. Rosales looked at her, stunned by her response. He had expected a demand, a negotiation, but not this willingness to extend a hand even after everything that had happened. Tears welled up in his eyes as he nodded, realizing that Maria was offering them all a chance at redemption, a path that could heal the wounds they had inflicted on each other. As they stood in that office, two adversaries now forced to work together by the cruel twists of fate, Maria felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made her decision not out of weakness or fear, but out of a deep understanding that the true battle was not against the Rosales family, but against the Reyes. In that moment, Maria chose to be the person her brother believed her to be, the person who could rise above the hate and find a way forward, even in the most impossible of circumstances. With the sound of sirens in the distance, signaling the arrival of help for Mrs. Rosales, Maria turned to Mr. Rosales one last time. "Let's go to the hospital," she said quietly. "There's no time to waste." And with that, they left the office together, not as enemies, but as two people bound by a shared struggle, walking towards an uncertain future where the choices they made would determine the fate of everyone they loved. As Maria stood in the hospital, the echoes of her decision resonating through the hallways, she couldn't help but feel a profound shift within herself. The conflicting emotions that had once raged inside her now seemed to ascend to a sense of purpose. She had chosen a path not driven by vengeance or bitterness, but by a deep understanding of what it meant to be truly human, flawed, yet capable of extraordinary compassion. The medical staff moved quickly to begin the necessary treatments for both her brother and Mrs. Rosales. The urgency of the situation left little time for reflection, yet Maria's thoughts were consumed by the enormity of what had just transpired. She had extended a hand to those who had wronged her, not out of weakness, but out of a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Mr. Rosales, still reeling from Maria's unexpected generosity, felt a deep sense of shame and gratitude. For the first time in years, he was forced to confront the man he had become, a man who had built his fortune on the backs of the vulnerable, a man who had failed his family in ways he could no longer ignore. As he sat in the hospital waiting room, the confession he had just made felt like a release, a first step towards atonement. Lucia, too, was transformed by the events. The woman who had once seen Maria as nothing more than a servant now saw her as a beacon of integrity and courage. Lucia, these tears were not just for her mother, but for the years of complicity and silence that had allowed such injustices to persist. She vowed to herself that she would no longer be a passive participant in her family's wrongdoings. She would stand with Maria, even if it meant turning against her blood. As news of Maria's decision spread, it became clear that this moment was more than just a personal victory. It was a catalyst for change. The Rosales family, once untouchable in their power and influence, now found themselves exposed, their misdeeds laid bare for all to see. The legal documents Maria had drafted were not just a safeguard for herself, they were a declaration of war against the system of exploitation that had allowed the Rosaleses to thrive. Over the following weeks, the media buzzed with reports of the Rosales family's downfall. Investigations were launched, employees came forward with their own stories of mistreatment, and the public support for Maria grew stronger by the day. She became a symbol of resilience and justice, a woman who had faced the darkness and chosen to bring light. Amid this storm, Maria's brother began to recover, his health improving with each passing day. The joy she felt at seeing him regain his strength was tempered by the knowledge that their lives had been forever altered. They could no longer return to the simplicity of the past, but Maria knew that they were moving towards a future where they could hold their heads high, unburdened by the weight of fear and oppression. As for Mrs. Rosales, her recovery was slow, and the once formidable woman was now frail and subdued. The accident had taken more than just her physical strength, it had stripped her of the arrogance and cruelty that had defined her for so long. In her weakened state, she began to reflect on the choices that had led her to this point, the hatred that had consumed her, and the love she had lost along the way. Maria visited Mrs. Rosales in the hospital one day, standing silently at her bedside. The two women, once enemies, now shared a moment of quiet understanding. There were no words of apology, no expressions of forgiveness, just a mutual recognition of the pain they had both endured. In that silence, Maria felt a sense of closure, knowing that she had done all she could to heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon her. As Maria walked away from the hospital, she felt a sense of liberation. The battle was not yet over, but she had found peace in the knowledge that she had chosen a path of compassion and justice. Her future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape, and she would do so with the strength and dignity that had carried her through the darkest of times. In the end, Maria discovered that true power did not lie in wealth or influence, but in the ability to rise above hatred and to choose love, even when it seemed impossible. And with that realization, she knew that she had already won the greatest victory of all. As the medical team tirelessly battled to stabilize Mrs. Rosales and improve Maria's brother's dear condition, a profound shift began to stir within the hearts of everyone entwined in this complex web of fate. The flames of vengeance and the heavy burden of resentment, which had once consumed them, started to fade, gradually replaced by an awareness of the delicate nature of human life and the possibility of redemption. Maria, who had initially acted out of desperation, now watched in awe as her choices set off a cascade of events far beyond her wildest imagination. It dawned on her that the true victory wasn't in the wealth she had once coveted, but in the rare opportunity to dismantle the destructive cycle of hatred and bitterness that had ensnared them all. That fateful night, as she kept a silent vigil beside her brother's hospital bed, Maria's mind raced with reflections on the dramatic twist her life had taken. The road to healing, both physical and emotional, stretched before her, filled with daunting challenges and painful reckonings. Yet, amid the overwhelming uncertainty, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a flicker of genuine hope began to warm her heart. In the turbulent days that followed Maria's life-altering decision, emotions ran high, and revelations came crashing down like relentless waves. As Mrs. Rosales fought for every breath in the sterile confines of the intensive care unit, Mr. Rosales, once a man of stone, found himself crumbling under the weight of his guilt and shame. The lies he had so meticulously crafted over the years began to unravel, exposing a legacy of corruption that shocked even the most hardened among them. In a small, dimly lit conference room that had been hastily repurposed into an impromptu operations hub, Maria, Lucia, and a team of battle-hardened lawyers listened in stunned silence as Mr. Rosales laid bare his sins, each confession more damning than the last. He spoke of bribes slipped into greedy hands, of taxes skillfully dodged, and, worst of all, the horrifying truth about the tainted money that had funded a charity meant to offer hope to the helpless. The lottery ticket, Mr. Rosales whispered, his voice trembling with despair, was bought with money meant for an orphanage. I thought I could win big and return it tenfold. Lucia, her heart breaking under the weight of her father's revelations, struggled to reconcile the man she had admired with the stranger who now stood before her, a shattered remnant of his former self. Maria, on the other hand, was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, a mix of vindication and sorrow. The justice she had sought for so long was finally within reach, but the emotional toll it exacted was far greater than she had ever anticipated. In a quieter corner of the bustling hospital, amidst the chaos, Maria's brother began to show the first signs of recovery, his condition slowly improving under the relentless care of the medical staff. Each small step forward was a poignant reminder of the compassion and mercy Maria had extended, proving that even in the darkest of times, the light of human kindness could still break through. However, the storm was far from over. As Mr. Rosales' confessions spilled out into the open, they brought with them a new wave of legal and ethical dilemmas. The lottery winnings, now tainted by their dubious origins, became the epicenter of a fierce moral debate. Maria found herself thrust into the center of a media frenzy, with reporters hungry for every scrap of information and activists loudly demanding that the misappropriated funds be returned to their rightful purpose. Amid this swirling chaos, a mysterious note found its way to Maria, hinting at even darker secrets lurking beneath the surface, secrets that could once again upend everything she thought she knew. As her heart pounded in her chest, Maria realized with a sinking feeling that her quest for truth and justice was far from over. Each revelation brought with it new questions, each more agonizing than the last, and the path ahead seemed more treacherous with every step she took. The nota's anonymity didn't last long. The private investigator, sensing that he was quickly losing his grip on the situation, made a bold move. He appeared at the hospital, his face a mixture of desperation and cold calculation. "I have something," he whispered, his voice barely audible as he addressed Maria and Lucia. "Evidence that could destroy everyone, or save them. The choice is yours." Maria and Lucia exchanged glances filled with a deep, unspoken fear. The investigator laid out before them a collection of damning photographs, images of Mr. Rosales entangled with high-ranking officials, and documents that exposed a sprawling web of corruption far beyond anything they had ever imagined. The weight of the discovery pressed down on them, making it difficult to breathe. Maria, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and anxiety, managed to ask, "What is it that you want from us?" The investigator, without missing a beat, coldly replied, "Tie immunity for myself and a share of the reward." His words cut through the air like a knife, leaving them in an even more agonizing ethical quagmire. To reveal the entire truth would mean delivering justice to countless victims, yet it would also annihilate lives and send shockwaves through the very fabric of society. Concealing the truth would make them accomplices to the very crimes they had vowed to dismantle. As the gravity of their decision loomed over them, Maria's brother, who had gained some clarity thanks to his recent treatment, offered a surprising insight. Marie whispered, his voice frail but resolute, "Never forget why this all began. It was never about money or vengeance. It was always about seeking justice and ensuring a life of dignity." His words pierced Maria's heart, stirring something deep within her, a reminder of the principle she had once held dear. Lucia, on the other hand, wrestled with the torment of her own divided loyalties. She felt the crushing weight of familial bonds on one side and her unwavering sense of justice on the other. "If we expose everything," she thought aloud, her voice tinged with despair, "not only will my father be ruined, but countless others will be as well. Who are we to play God in deciding their fate?" The tension in the room was suffocating. The investigator, sensing the precariousness of his situation, waited with barely concealed impatience, knowing that his future balanced precariously on the edge of their decision. Maria, overwhelmed by the burden she carried, closed her eyes as if seeking solace in the darkness behind her eyelids. When she finally opened them, they shone with a newfound resolve. "We are not here to pass judgment," she declared, her voice steady with conviction, "but neither can we stand by and allow a cover-up. We will turn over every piece of evidence to the proper authorities and let justice run its course." Her decision was irreversible, a step from which there was no retreat. They were fully aware that the repercussions would be immense, yet they also knew it was the only way to achieve true redemption. The consequences of Maria and Lucia's decision sent shockwaves through the nation, igniting a political and social earthquake. Within mere hours, the media was ablaze with reports of a massive corruption scandal, exposing fraud on a scale that left the public reeling. Accusations of embezzlement, theft from charitable funds, and a corruption ring that reached the highest echelons of power dominated the headlines. The once grand Rosales mansion, a symbol of wealth and influence, was now at the center of a relentless media frenzy. Maria found herself thrust into the spotlight, her actions sparking a national debate over ethics and morality. To some, she was a beacon of integrity, bravely confronting the rot within the elite. To others, she was seen as a betrayer, someone who had turned on those who had once trusted her. The nation's talk shows and social media platforms buzzed with divided opinions, each side passionately arguing about her role in the unfolding drama. Amidst the chaos, a group of people appeared at the hospital, individuals who had been the intended beneficiaries of the stolen charity funds. Families were struggling to make ends meet, children from an orphanage and elderly residents from a nursing home, all of whom had been robbed of a support they desperately needed. Their stories, filled with pain and hardship, put a human face on the abstract notion of corruption. A single mother, clutching her sick child to her chest, spoke through tears, all we want is what is rightfully ours. That money could have changed our lives. Maria, deeply moved by their pleas, faced a moral crisis unlike any she had ever encountered. The lottery prize, which was legally hers, was now tainted by the knowledge of its origin. Could she, in good conscience, keep it, knowing how many lives it could transform if returned to those who truly needed it? Seeing Maria's inner turmoil, Lucia gently took her hand, her voice soft but firm. "Whatever choice you make," G whispered, "I will stand by you every step of the way." In that pivotal moment, Maria experienced a profound awakening, a realization that the wealth she had once believed would bring her liberation and joy had instead morphed into an unbearable weight on her soul. As she gazed into the hopeful eyes of those who stood before her, families and children whose lives had been crushed by the very corruption she had uncovered, she felt a surge of clarity, recalling her hardships, the sacrifices she had made, and the values she held dear. Maria made a choice that would leave everyone in shock. With a voice trembling with emotion yet resolute in its conviction, Maria declared, "This money was never meant to be mine. It belongs to those who have suffered, to those who need it the most. I will donate every cent to the charity fund, ensuring it finally serves the purpose it was always intended for." The room fell into a stunned silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Then, a wave of emotion washed over those present, some with tears in their eyes, others nodding in solemn agreement. Maria knew that this decision would alter the trajectory of her life irreversibly, yet for the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of peace. She was convinced that she was doing the right thing, regardless of what the future might hold. News of Maria's remarkable decision spread with the speed of a wildfire. The media, which had been relentless in their coverage of the scandal, now had a fresh narrative: a domestic worker turned unexpected millionaire who had chosen to give it all away. The public was captivated by this new twist, and Maria's story became a national sensation. Amid this media frenzy, an unforeseen event occurred. Mrs. Rosales emerged from her coma. Her first words, though faint, were laden with confusion. What happened? The awakening of Mrs. Rosales introduced a new layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. The doctors revealed that she was suffering from selective amnesia, erasing all memories of the lottery ticket, the scandal, and the recent turmoil. This unexpected turn created a profound ethical dilemma for everyone involved. With Lucia by her side, Maria made her way to the hospital room where the woman who had once tormented her now lay. Mrs. Rosales, pale and fragile in her hospital bed, was a far cry from the formidable figure Maria had known. "Maria, what brings you here? Is everything all right at the house?" Mrs. Rosales inquired, her voice tinged with an unfamiliar gentleness that Maria had never before encountered. Maria's heart raced. Here was her chance to rewrite history, to craft a version of events that might favor her. The temptation to exact revenge, to manipulate the situation to her advantage, flared briefly within her. But as Lucia sensed the internal battle raging in her friend, she squeezed Maria's hand, offering silent encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Maria decided to confront the truth head-on. She began recounting the story in its entirety: the discovery of the ticket, the humiliations she had endured, the revelations of deep-seated corruption, and her final decision to donate the money. As Maria spoke, she watched the emotions play out on Mrs. Rosales' face: first confusion, then disbelief, followed by a wave of shame, and finally a profound sadness. "I don't remember any of this," Mrs. Rosales murmured, her voice trembling. "But if what you say is true, I must have been a monster. How could I have behaved so cruelly?" At that moment, Mr. Rosales entered the room. He took in the scene: his wife's tears, Maria's unwavering gaze, and understood that it was time to face the music. It's time for all of us to own up to our actions," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his guilt. As Maria watched the Rosales family grapple with the truth, she realized she was witnessing the dawn of a profound transformation. Mrs. Rosales' amnesia, far from being a hindrance, had paradoxically become a chance for a fresh start, not just for the Rosales family, but for everyone involved in the scandal. The chain of events set in motion by Mrs. Rosales' awakening and Maria's confession rippled outwards in ways no one could have foreseen. What initially seemed like a curse mystery, Rosales' selective memory loss emerged as a strange and unexpected blessing, providing a rare opportunity for healing and redemption. Driven by a mixture of compassion and a deep desire to finally put the past behind her, Maria resolved to share the complete truth with Mrs. Rosales. With Lucia standing beside her, offering silent strength, Maria recounted everything from the betrayals of the past to the dramatic events of the present. Mrs. Rosales' response was heart-wrenching. As Maria's words sank in, silent tears began to stream down the face of the woman who had once wielded power over her with such cruelty. "I cannot recall being that person," Mrs. Rosales wept, her voice choked with sorrow. But I feel the truth in every word you've always spoken, Maria. How could I have ever been so heartless?" And in that moment, Maria understood that what she was witnessing was not just the unraveling of a lie, but the painful birth of a new beginning. The past could never be erased, but perhaps in the ashes of what was, something new and better could grow. In a moment of raw vulnerability, an unexpected connection blossomed between the two women. Maria, who had arrived to confront the woman she once viewed as her oppressor, found herself instead offering solace to a person shattered by the unbearable burden of forgotten sins. At that very moment, Mr. Rosales, driven by a desperate need for redemption, made a life-altering decision. "I will confess everything," he declared, his voice quivering with a mix of fear and resolve. "Every underhanded deal, every bribe, every deceitful word. It is time to cleanse our family name, even if it means sacrificing everything we've built." Lucia, deeply moved by her father's courageous honesty and her mother's unexpected transformation, stepped forward. "We will not let you face this alone," she said, her voice filled with unwavering support as she grasped her parents' hands. "Together as a family, we will bear the weight of these consequences." As Maria observed this poignant scene, a swirl of emotions overtook her: astonishment, confusion, and an unexpected sense of empathy. The empire she had once envied and despised now stood before her as nothing more than a fragile illusion, constructed on a foundation of deceit and unimaginable pain. Amid this emotional upheaval, the private investigator re-entered the scene, this time armed with new evidence that could partially absolve Maria while undeniably condemning the Rosales family. "I have the proof," he whispered, his tone laced with the gravity of his revelation. "The ticket was purchased with clean money, but I've also uncovered far greater frauds committed by the Rosales family." This revelation thrust Maria into a profound moral dilemma. She could use this information to fully exonerate herself, but doing so would obliterate any hope of redemption for the Rosales. Sensing the inner turmoil within Maria, Lucia gently took her hand. "Whatever you choose," she murmured with a deep sense of solidarity, "we will stand by you. You've displayed more integrity than any of us could have imagined." Maria, her gaze shifting from Lucia's earnest eyes to Mr. Rosales' weary face, and finally to Mrs. Rosales, who watched with a mixture of confusion and remorse, made a decision that would astonish everyone present. "No more lies," Maria declared with unwavering conviction. "We will confront the truth, all of it together, no matter the cost." Her decision marked a pivotal moment. The Rosales family, Maria and Lucia, came to realize that they were now bound together, not by blood or wealth, but by a shared commitment to uncover the truth and seek redemption. The following morning, headlines across every newspaper and news channel blazed with the story: Rosales scandal. Domestic worker unveils corruption network. Maria's courageous choice to expose the entire truth had ignited an unprecedented media frenzy. Suddenly, Maria found herself thrust into the eye of a storm. Journalists swarmed outside the hospital, eager to capture every detail of the unfolding drama. Social media erupted with heated debates over ethics, justice, and the power of redemption. Amid the turmoil, Maria's brother, now fully recovered thanks to the medical treatment he had received, arrived at the hospital to visit her. His presence served as a poignant reminder of the reasons behind Maria's courageous decisions. "I am incredibly proud of you, sis," he said, embracing her with heartfelt emotion. "But are you sure this is what you want? The road you've chosen will be fraught with challenges." Maria, deeply touched by her brother's unwavering support, felt her determination grow even stronger. "It is the only path that feels right," she replied with conviction. "I can't forge a new future based on falsehoods and hidden truths." Meanwhile, Lucia, taking the lead amidst the crises, arranged for a press conference. The young heiress, resolved to confront the situation openly, intended to address the public on behalf of her family, seeking to bring transparency and accountability to their actions. Just before the press conference was set to commence, Maria received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was cold and menacing. "If you speak, there will be dire repercussions. Some truths are best left undisclosed." Maria's heart pounded with fear, yet her resolve remained unshaken. With shaky hands, she confided in Lucia about the threatening call. "We can cancel the press conference." Lucia suggested, her concern for Maria's safety evident. "Your well-being is our top priority." Maria looked into Lucia's eyes, then glanced at the Rosales family, who awaited anxiously in the hospital room. She thought of her brother, the recipients of the charity's funds, and all the lives impacted by the deception that had been unraveling. "No," she declared firmly, her voice steady despite her fear. "We've come too far to retreat now. The truth must be unveiled, irrespective of the consequences." With this decision, Maria and Lucia prepared to confront the media and the world at large. They understood that their revelations would alter lives, disrupt institutions, and potentially place them in jeopardy, but they also recognized it as the sole route to genuine redemption. As they approached the press room, Maria felt the immense weight of responsibility on her shoulders. This was her chance to give a voice to those who had been silenced by corruption and power. With every step she took, she reaffirmed her commitment to face whatever challenges lay ahead, regardless of the personal risks involved. The press conference turned out to be an explosive event that sent shockwaves through society. Standing side by side, Maria and Lucia laid bare the truth without holding anything back. They spoke of systemic corruption, the mysterious lottery ticket, and how a single desperate act had exposed a vast network of lies that extended far beyond the Rosales family. As Maria recounted years of abuse and exploitation, Lucia unveiled her father's illicit business dealings and the involvement of influential figures. The press room was engulfed in silence, interrupted only by the clicks of cameras and the occasional gasp of astonishment from the journalists. However, the most shocking revelation came when Maria disclosed the source of the charity fund's money had originated from the illegal operations of a powerful cartel. This disclosure sent ripples through the media and triggered an immediate response from law enforcement. Within hours, the Rosales mansion was raided by the police, and Mr. Rosales, still confined to his hospital bed, was taken into custody. The investigation quickly broadened, implicating politicians, business leaders, and even members of the judiciary. Maria and the Rosales family found themselves caught in the epicenter of the storm. The threats against their lives became palpable and urgent, necessitating police protection and marking the beginning of a profound transformation in their lives. Amidst the chaos, Maria experienced a profound epiphany. Looking at Lucia, who remained resolute despite witnessing her world collapse, and thinking of her brother, whose life had been saved by the serendipitous twist of fate, Maria grasped at the profound significance of life and family. In a rare moment of calm amidst the chaos, Maria turned to Lucia, her voice tinged with reflection. "All of this," she began, "started from a place of desperation and vengeance, but now I see it as about something far greater than just us." Lucia, sensing the weight of Maria's words, gently took her hand. "It's about doing what is right, no matter the cost," she responded, her voice filled with quiet determination. With this newfound clarity, Maria made a decision that would astonish everyone around her. She called for a meeting that would bring together the Rosales family, her brother, their legal teams, and representatives of those who had suffered due to the corrupt charity fund. She had devised a plan, a bold and daring one that held the potential for redemption, but it would demand significant sacrifices from all involved. As Maria prepared to unveil her idea, she understood the gravity of what she was about to do. This plan had the power to not only transform her own life, but to impact the lives of countless others. The journey toward true justice and redemption was just beginning, and Maria was resolved to see it through, no matter the hurdles that lay ahead. The hospital conference room, usually a place of sterile decisions, was now the setting for a meeting unlike any other. Maria, Her resolve was steely and her emotions raw, took center stage before the tense and diverse group that had assembled. "What I am about to propose," Nishi started, her voice steady yet charged with emotion, "may seem radical, even unimaginable, but I believe it is our only chance to set things right." She then laid out her ambitious plan to establish a foundation using the entirety of the lottery prize money and the assets recovered from the Rosales family as illicit enterprises. This foundation would not be just another charity, it would be co-managed by Maria, the Rosales family, and representatives of the original charity fund as beneficiaries, ensuring transparency and accountability. "But this is about more than just money," Maria continued, her voice gaining strength. "I propose that we all step forward, confess our mistakes publicly, accept the legal consequences, and dedicate the rest of our lives to making amends for the damage that has been done." Her words were met with a heavy silence, the weight of her proposal sinking in. The lawyers exchanged stunned glances, while the victims' representatives whispered among themselves. It was Mr. Rosales, his face ashen but his resolve clear, who broke the silence. "I've spent my life wrapped in lies and driven by greed," he admitted, his voice thick with regret. "Then I'm ready to face the consequences and do whatever it takes to atone for my wrongs." Lucia, tears welling in her eyes but her posture strong, voiced her support for the plan. "And I will use every ounce of my education and the privileges I've been afforded to ensure this foundation makes a genuine difference," she vowed. Mrs. Rosales, still grappling with the remnants of her amnesia but deeply moved by the nobility of the plan, nodded quietly, her grip tightening on her husband's hand. The representatives of the victims, though initially skeptical, recognized in this proposal a rare chance for true justice and meaningful restitution. Maria's brother, now fully recovered, offered his perspective as one of the many who had been affected. "This plan isn't just about changing our lives," he declared with conviction, "it is about shaping the future for generations to come." As the discussion unfolded, the tension in the room grew palpable. Each individual wrestled with their inner turmoil, balancing the instinct for self-preservation against the possibility of true redemption. Maria watched the unfolding reactions, acutely aware that she was asking for enormous sacrifices from everyone involved. Yet, she also knew deep down that this was the only path to achieving genuine and lasting justice. As the debate raged on, one thing became increasingly clear. No matter what decision was reached in that room, nothing would ever return to the way it was. The choices they made that day would reverberate far beyond their own lives, sending shockwaves through society itself. The silence that followed Maria's proposal was abruptly broken by the creak of the door as it swung open. A man in a sharply tailored suit stepped in, his commanding presence immediately seizing the attention of everyone in the room. It was the Attorney General, drawn to this gathering by the sheer magnitude of the unfolding case. "I have been briefed on your proposal, Miss Maria," he began in a somber tone. "It's commendable, but the law must run its course." The tension in the room thickened like a fog, yet Maria remained unshaken. To everyone's surprise, even her own, she addressed the Attorney General with a calm, composed demeanor. "Sir," she began, her voice steady, "I fully recognize the importance of justice. But isn't the truest form of justice one that not only addresses past wrongs but also seeks to heal and prevent future harm? Our proposal aims to do precisely that." The Attorney General held her gaze, weighing her words carefully. After a long, contemplative pause, he nodded slowly. "Proceed," he granted, his voice carrying the weight of the decision. Energized by his approval, the group plunged into hours of intense work, meticulously refining every aspect of the plan. Mrs. Rosales, profoundly moved by Maria's empathy and vision, was the first to put pen to paper. "I want to become the person I was meant to be," she said, her voice breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. Mr. Rosales, following his wife's lead, agreed to reduce charges in exchange for his full cooperation and commitment to the plan. Lucia vowed to use her education and resources to guarantee the foundation's transparency and efficacy. One by one, the victims' representatives and the legal teams signed on, each recognizing the unique opportunity for restorative justice. Maria's brother, seeing the potential for real change, volunteered to be the public face of the foundation, embodying the positive impact it could achieve. As the final signature was scrawled onto the last document, a palpable sense of accomplishment washed over the room. Maria looked around at the weary but hopeful faces and felt an immense burden lift from her heart. "This is only the beginning," she said softly, her voice filled with resolve. "The journey to redemption will be long and fraught with challenges, but we will face it together." Impressed by their collective resolve, the Attorney General pledged his support to ensure the plan was implemented within the legal framework, offering a lifeline to their vision of justice. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the room in a warm, golden glow, Maria reflected on the extraordinary journey that had been sparked by a simple lottery ticket. What began as a quest for revenge had blossomed into a path of redemption, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. Sometimes, Mariam mused, her eyes drifting over the Rosales family, her brother, and Lucia. True wealth isn't found in money, but in the chance to do what is right, no matter how difficult it may be. With this thought, the group slowly dispersed, each carrying with them the weight of a new beginning and the promise of a brighter future, not only for themselves but for all those who would be touched by the work of the foundation. The story of Maria, the Rosales family, and the fateful lottery ticket would soon become a beacon of hope and transformation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the possibility for true redemption and change always exists. I invite you to share your thoughts and impressions in the comments section below. Your feedback means the world to me, and if this story resonated with you, please leave a like. Blessings to you all. As we reach the end of this powerful journey, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on everything we've explored together. What have you learned from Maria's story, the Rosales family's transformation, and the remarkable path to redemption they all undertook? Please share in the comments below one thing you've learned and will carry forward into your own life. Your insights and reflections are invaluable, and they can inspire others who may be facing their challenges. If you found this video meaningful, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that inspire, challenge, and transform. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.